Okay guys, so we're now going to look at Remains. Now, Remains is one of my favourite poems in this booklet. You get the hint that I really do actually like the modern poetry. It's written by Simon Armitage, very, very famous poet, and it's actually from a selection of poems that he wrote for a Channel 4 documentary called The Not Dead. And these are based on real life occurrences. They are real soldiers' accounts. This really happened. And Armitage says, this is the closest he's ever gotten to writing war poetry, and to be quite honest, he doesn't want to write anything else about it because he was pretty much traumatised by this. It's called The Not Dead. If you get the opportunity, it's available to watch on YouTube. It's I think like 2 hours long. I wouldn't say you must watch the whole thing, but I would suggest that you fast forward to about 40 minutes in, where this particular story is told. The person that's talking in this is a young man named Rob. He's a real person. He exists. This is based on his life and his experiences in the army. Now, the title itself, Remains. When we think about the word remains, we have to think about two different things. First of all, the obvious one is it's the leftovers. And when we consider Rob's story, and we read the poem, we think, this is actually could be talking about the trauma that he has been left with. But also remains means a body, doesn't it? The idea of, it's the remains of what's left of you when you die. So we've got physical remains and also metaphorical remains, the leftovers, the trauma that Rob has experienced as part of his experiences. So, if we have a look at the structure, again I'm going to lift this up so we can see the whole poem. You can't read it, but what you can see is that up until the last stanza, it's pretty regular. It's a first-person account, so we could argue that it's a dramatic monologue. Trust me, it's very dramatic. We say that it's a regular structure. 4-line stanzas. It has incidental rhyme. There's a few little bits in there, but nothing obvious. It kind of follows the pattern of speech because it's meant to sound like Rob's actually talking, and if you listen to him perform this, that's what it sounds like. It really genuinely sounds like speech pattern. There's a lot of enjambment in this poem. And as we know from a lot of other poems, enjambment often signifies the continuing nature of something. And when we consider that we know that Rob is suffering from PTSD, suffering from trauma, from his experiences, then we could say, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That whole idea of the fact that this is continual for him. It never changes. It keeps going. So, let's go back to the top of the poem and let's go through. So, look at that first stanza. Let's see if we can make that a bit clearer for you. Oh, there goes my fingers. I need to get my nails done so it looks a bit more pretty for you guys. So, on another occasion we got sent out to tackle looters raiding a bank, and one of them legs it up the road, probably armed, possibly not. So, first thing, another. So, the word another suggests that this is one of many things. This has happened again. And we know that actually when we watch the Not Dead, that this is actually the first time Rob's ever killed somebody. But this actually suggests that on another occasion that this is one of many experiences that has left him in this state. We got sent out to tackle looters raiding a bank, and one of them legs it up the road. So what we've got here is we've got some quite colloquial language, which implies to us that Rob is quite young. It's informal. Colloquial is a great word when we're talking about method. It's a great way to talk about how the character is created. Colloquial language implies he's young, he's inexperienced. And when we are talking about the fact that, you know, if we have watched the section of The Not Dead with him in it, I really do suggest you do, we know that this is the first time he's ever killed somebody. So, yeah, he is young and inexperienced. He's not an officer, okay? He's not somebody who is used to making the difficult choices. He's used to being told to go and do something, and he goes out and does it. And then we've got this kind of, what's the word? Paradox almost. Probably armed, possibly not. Probably implies likely. Possibly implies not likely. They're not sure, but they have to be prepared for the worst. So we've got likely and not likely. And it's this paradoxical situation that he's in. He doesn't know. He's got to make a split-second decision. And so he makes the decision along with his friends, myself and somebody else are all of the same mind. He wants to make it really clear to us that it's not just him. He's sharing the guilt. You know, he's not some bloodthirsty murderer. He's a soldier that's doing what he's been asked to do. So all three of us open fire. And when we've got that somebody else and somebody else and somebody else sort of thing, it's really just emphasising it's not just him. And we've got, again, three of a kind, all letting fire. Okay? And it's suggesting there's a little bit of overkill, because, you know, it's one bloke. Which could imply that they're nervous, scared. You know, when you think about it, this looter, he's not an enemy soldier. He's a civilian. And these are men who've been trained to kill soldiers. So this whole idea of the fact that they're killing this civilian is actually, it's not what they're ready for. So it suggests that they don't know what to do, that their guns explode from them, open fire. And they're almost not in control. And I swear, I see every round as it rips through his life. Love that. It so slows it down. We've got the caesura here that, yeah, that kind of pause midway slows it down. Makes it worse. I mean, you've seen those like horrible films where they slow it down, when they go into slow motion, just to remind us that something horrible's happening. And, you know, often they repeat it, and that's the other thing here. I see every round as it rips through his life. It's almost like he keeps on seeing it over and over again. I see broad daylight on the other side. That's such a violent, graphic image. It's really quite horrible. Violence and death and... You know, this idea, I see broad daylight on the other side, that metaphor there that just really emphasises exactly how horrific this is. So we've hit this looter a dozen times. So we've come out of that kind of slow-mo bit. And he's there on the ground, sort of inside out. It's so grim. That really unpleasant, uncomfortable image. It's also very dehumanising as well of the looter, because inside out, jumpers are inside out, people aren't inside out. Pain itself, the image of agony, and this fantastic metaphor here. I mean, it's truly depressing and really sad, this whole idea that he is the image of agony. He is, when you think of pain, this is what you'd find, It's really strong metaphor. And again, we've got this colloquialism here. One of my mates goes by and tosses his guts back into his body, then he's carted off in the back of a lorry. It's that kind of nonchalance about it, that we know that actually Rob doesn't actually feel, but he feels like he has to talk about it in that manner. So it's like he doesn't care, he's trying not to care. That soldier versus enemy sort of mentality. And it's really interesting. We've got this strong metaphor that emphasises just how much pain he's in. And then we've got, directly after it, juxtaposed to that image, we've got this kind of matter-of-fact image of him being lobbed into the back of a lorry. Juxtaposition of it. And that language, he's carted off in the back of a lorry. It's more of that dehumanisation. It really links to that soldier versus enemy mentality. The easiest way to make yourself not realise you're killing a human being is to dehumanise the enemy, turn them into animals, make you feel like they're not real people. End of story. Except, not really. His blood shadow stays on the street, and out on patrol I walk right over it week after week. Then I'm home on leave. But I blink and he bursts again through doors of the bank. Sleep and he's probably armed and possibly not. Dream and he's torn apart by a dozen rounds. And the drink and the drugs won't flush him out. I'm going to pause there with the caesura, and I'm going to have a look at that end of story. Except not really. So that's where it should end. That is where a soldier's brain should cut it off. The soldier should end it here. But, except not really. He can't get rid of it. Can't get it out of his head. Can't stop thinking about it. Can't get it out of his head. His blood shadow stays on the street. Beautiful metaphor there. Okay. I mean, we know that he's talking about the blood that's all over the street after they've gotten rid of the body, but it's always there, reminding him. Even though it's a shadow, okay, so it's the absence of light. And this metaphor is just like, it can't always be there. Shadows don't stay there forever, but it's because his brain keeps it there. I walk right over it week after week. Even though it's been washed away, there is no way on earth that the blood would still be there 3 weeks later. But he keeps on seeing it there. It's always there, always reminding him. Then I'm home on leave. It's interesting, home on leave. It shows us he's going back. He'll eventually have to go back. going to go back and do more things like this. But I blink, and he bursts again through the doors of the bank. Can't leave it behind. He's getting flashbacks. Sign of PTSD. Sleep, and he's probably armed and possibly not. So this tells us where he's going for, how it's getting to him. Dream, and he's torn apart by a dozen rounds. And look at that again, probably armed, possibly not, being reminded of this paradoxical situation. Dream, and he's torn apart by a dozen rounds. So it's happening while he's asleep. And he's torn apart, that lovely metaphor there. I mean, it's gross, but again, it's that whole idea of he's being torn up again. This Luther's being turned into clothes. He's being dehumanized, and the drink and the drugs won't flush him out. So we've got this desperation here. Okay, he's self-medicating. He's trying everything he can to get rid of this. He's desperate. And he's here in my head when I close my eyes, dug in behind enemy lines, not left for dead in some distant sun-stunned, sand-smothered land, or 6 feet under in desert sand. Can't get rid of it. Memories are stuck. Then we've got this beautiful selection of sibilants here. Distant, sun-stunned, sand-smothered land, or 6 feet under in desert sand. It sounds like sand moving, that sand sound. Kind of hushed, quiet noise there. But near to the knuckle, here and now. So we've got near to the knuckle here. You know, is that, yeah. He's near my hands. I can't get it off my hands. And then this last line here. And year 11, if you don't get this one, I am thoroughly disappointed in you. Because who has bloody hands? Lady Macbeth. And what does Lady Macbeth do? She kills herself. So we have this hint about Lady Macbeth here. Which could imply that, you know, he may be considering, well, we don't know whether he's considering killing himself, but it is a case of he is so guilty, he feels so guilty about this, he sees no way out. And when we also think about Lady Macbeth and her fantastic sleepwalking, you know, best scene in the play. But we've also got this idea that his dreams are traumatised, he can't cope. So, as far as the poem is concerned, as far as we are looking at comparing it, you can compare it to any of the war poems. I think it works fantastically with War Photographer. I think it goes really, really well with things like Exposure. It goes very, very well with Kamikaze, talking about the post idea. It goes very well with Poppies as well. You can use this with pretty much any of the war poems. It is such a it's such a personal poem. And I really, really suggest, yet again, please, please, please watch that clip of Rob reading this poem, because it just shows you everything that he goes through, and you get so much more of the context simply by reading along while he reads. Okay, thank you very much, guys.